What's up, Yinzers, Yinzettes? Welcome back to yet another edition of Pucks and Nat, where we will give you the latest stat time breakdowns, everything from this past week in Penguins hockey. And if you didn't notice earlier today, the episode from last week was just posted on YouTube. We had a few technical glitches, technical difficulties, audio malfunctions, etc., etc. But that is up there, so it's kind of a double feature today. Not technically, but sorta. So, Hunter, I'm back with you this week. How are you doing today?
Fifth game of the preseason. I'm ready for the preseason to be over at this rate. Thank God we're going down to, what is it, Kelsey? 4 preseason games next year with the new CBA. So, yeah, kind of over preseason hockey at this rate. I We don't need 5 to 7 preseason games. I think I'm good at like 4.
Yeah, yeah, 7 is a lot. Like that's
Too
what the
many.
Penguins are playing this year. That is a lot of preseason games, and you figure by those last couple, like the rosters will pretty much be sorted out. Maybe not by Wednesday, but certainly by the last one. There'll be that warm up game, and then the season starts. But yeah, it'll be a little nice for training camp to be a little shorter next season. And I don't know if anybody saw, but the regular season is starting on September 29th next year, I believe. Is that what Elliot Friedman said? So yeah,
Caleb
nice
Run had
early
that. But
start.
yes, 4 preseason games starts on the 29th. And I think the season ends in a little earlier in June, which is good. I like it like that.
Yeah, and there's 84 games next season, folks. Let's not forget that. We get 2 bonus games of hockey in the regular season. So lots of exciting changes next year. We'll see how all that goes, but in the meantime, we want to focus on what's happened this last week because even since the last time we talked, and for some of you, the last time we talked was earlier today, but in reality, it was last Monday. And when we filmed that episode, we were talking about some of the standouts from training camp from the first 3 days of practices. Obviously, this predated any preseason games, any of that. I gotta say, I think some things have changed for me since we last met last week. But let's talk about just some of the stuff that's happened at camp this past week. The Penguins roster has been trimmed down. It went to 58. Then it said 43. We're not sure what is going on with the math there. We were kind of trying to figure that out. I don't know if they're accounting for injured players or whatnot, but anyway, camp roster's down to 43 players. Hunter and I were scratching our heads over that math, but anyway, so we're seeing kind of a picture start to take place. Even in these practices, it's down to 2 squads. For the most part, a lot of the NHL veterans are kind of on one squad. You see, a scattered mix of other guys on the other one. And, preseason game tonight, that's about 30 minutes from now. We're not going to talk about it because by the time this is out, that game will be long gone. But I do want to talk about some of the guys who have stood out, and I'll start with you, Hunter. I have a couple guys in mind for myself, but if you could just pick a couple who have really impressed you this training camp, who would you say here?
That's a good question. I definitely think Tristan Brose has had a really good camp. He's putting himself in a position to potentially make the team as a depth forward. We're going to have our 23-man roster predictions, and I'm sure we're going to both look like idiots at the end of this when the roster doesn't look like that at all. I thought long and hard about him. I think he's going to be an NHL player this season, but it really could go either way. But I really think his skating's been sound. He's been really good in the preseason games he has played in, especially the game against Montreal where he really showcased his release. It just exploded off his stick. So I think he's definitely had a really good camp. And then again, Kelsey, this one's obvious. Sergei Miroshov has been the best goaltender at camp in the preseason, and I don't really think it's close. I know everyone is really excited about him, and rightfully so. I think there's a chance he could be the goaltender of the future, but I think some people also need to pump the brakes on just rushing him. You want to get this development right just because of how much raw talent he has, which is why I think it's in the team's best interest to have him play a full season in Wilkes-Barre to just see how he handles a full starter's workload down there and just see how he goes. He dominated the ECHL last year. Now you're going to play against, more professional players in the AHL, and there's players down there that are getting ready to hit the NHL at some point. So how does he fare with those? But I would say those two right away for me. Tristan Brose, Sergei Miroshov. If you want to put Avery Hayes in there, I think he has a really good shot at making this team. Sure, but I would go right now Tristan Brose and Miroshov.
Nice. And I mean, I can't disagree with either of those. Tristan Rose was one of mine. And honestly, I don't want to say it was unexpected because people who have been watching Bros know that he's a good all-around player. He's good in all three zones, responsible in all three zones, and he knows how to put the puck in the back of the net at the end of the day. And it's funny because I asked him like how he can separate himself in this camp from, the other competition in it. And he was just like, he thought for a second, then he just goes, score. Like he just said it so plainly, and then he kind of went into a longer explanation. But I mean, that's the crux of it. That's this guy's mindset. Like the thing is, he's not sacrificing defense in order to create. He's so responsible in all three zones. He plays a very mature game for his age too. There's just not much deficiency in it at all. And I'm kind of surprised by how NHL ready he looks. And that's going to kind of lead me somewhere else in a couple minutes here when we talk about guys that we want to see more from. But keep an eye on Tristan Bros. I think he definitely does have an excellent shot at this roster, and he's definitely shown me more than I expected. If McGroarty was still in the picture, I think that'd be a different story, but we obviously don't know the situation. McGroarty's out indefinitely with that upper body injury. Still not really any update. He's not working out on the ice, so we have no idea when he's going to return. So that's still up in the air. And then the other guy I am keeping an eye on is Ben Kindle. I gotta say, I didn't have it on my training camp bingo card that Ben Kindle would look close-ish to NHL ready, but honestly, he's one of those guys at the beginning of camp, through those 3 practices, and when we talked last time, I hadn't seen very much at that point. I mean, he looked fine. There were other guys that stood out a little bit more, and that was kind of the whole thing with him. But once those preseason games started to kick in, he's getting better and better in every single game. And he's getting better as the competition gets better. And that's what's impressing me because he's the only player, and he is in the lineup tonight. He is slated to be in the lineup tonight against the Detroit Red Wings in Detroit.
He's
the
playing with
only
Billy
player
again.
Yeah. So he's the only player who has played all 4 preseason games. And if we think back to last year, that was Rickard McGroarty last year. Rickard McGroarty played all 6 preseason games last year. He's the only player to do so. Usually when you're getting that many reps in games, it's a good sign that you're doing something right in the eyes of the coaching staff. His skating is a lot better than even I thought it was. Hunter and I have discussed this. I know Hunter put this out on social media too. I never really understood what the issue with people saying what his skating was. I'm not seeing that at all. His edge work is phenomenal. I think, he could probably reach a little higher top speed, but that'll come a little bit more with more development. But in terms of like his smarts, his anticipation, his reads, like nothing is off. Like he's up to speed. He's not somebody I expect to get a 9-game trial only because of the situation with the roster and just, there's so many forwards competing for these spots. But it says a lot that they're keeping him around training camp when, the Calgary Hitmen's season has already started, So they're keeping him around for these NHL reps and these NHL games. He's been really, really impressive so far. And I have to say, if that 9-game trial does happen, I won't be shocked. But I think it is a bit of a long shot just because of the situation. So he's kind of my guy that I'm keeping an eye on. I think Ben Kindle's been great. But I do want to talk about some players who maybe we want to see a little bit more from camp, or maybe who need to do a little bit more to push themselves across the finish line and into the conversation for the NHL roster. And I'll start here. Mine's Philip Hollander. I know that, when camp started, he was from the get-go playing with guys like Rickard Rakell, Brian Rust. He's playing center for most of camp. He's shifted to the wing a little bit the last couple days, but for the most part, we've seen him at the center position. Kevin Hayes is injured. Penguins are down to center. I just think, if you're looking at this from purely like a positional perspective and positional battles and who's kind of showing more, if I'm picking between him and Tristan Bros right now, I think Tristan Bros has outplayed Philip Hollander. And I just want to see a little bit more from him over these next couple days. He is in the lineup tonight as well. But I think he needs to show a little bit more in order to really, make a case for himself and make sure that he stays on this roster because there's just so much competition. And I do think there's just a couple guys that have, quite frankly, just been outplaying him up to this point. But that's just me. I'll let you go.
I think that's fair. I do still think Hollander has had a fairly good camp, in my opinion. I mean, I know Bros, like I said, I've been really impressed with him, but Hollander's vision, his skating, I think has been really evident. They've been putting him with a lot of NHL regulars on some of the lines during camp just to really gauge him to see how he does. And I think he's passed with, flying colors. So we'll get to our roster projections a bit later, but I'm pretty happy with the camp that he has had so far. For me, I think it's someone like Valtteri Puustinen. I just have wanted to see more from him. He has NHL games under his belt. He has a really good release. I think when he uses it, it's one of the better releases on the team. Just haven't really seen it a lot during camp and a lot of the preseason so far. So if he wants to really make a run at this, he's got to have a really strong last week here. Like I wanted to see more out of him. Otherwise, Kelsey, I think it's just going to kind of be the situation where you kind of are who you are at this rate, where you're a fringe NHLer. You can make a difference sometimes, but you may not have what it takes to be a full-time NHLer. So I've just been a little disappointed in his camp to date.
I agree. And, I think the same kind of applies to Sam Poulin too. I didn't mention him before, but, I think Sam Poulin's had a decent camp. I mean, there have been a few practices and stuff where he has kind of stood out, his shots kind of popping a lot. I've noticed, at least anyway, in the scrimmages and the camp practices. But I have to say that I haven't really seen that translate to game action. And that's kind of been the whole, I don't want to say issue with him throughout his developmental curve with the Penguins, but you need to see some of that translate into the games. And I haven't seen that from him either. And, you want these guys to succeed. This is probably their last shot at really like making it with the Penguins, especially with all this young talent coming up. So I agree about Puustinen. I throw Poulin in there, like I said, but let's get to the chase. Hunter, I want to hear who you think is going to be on this 23-man roster on October 7th against the New York Rangers. Let's get down to business because this is probably going to happen this week. Training camp technically ends this Wednesday, which is the 1st. We don't know. There may be a few guys kept a couple days after just for that final preseason game on the 3rd against the Buffalo Sabres. But, for the most part, we'll have a pretty good picture at the end of the week what this roster is going to look like. So what do you think this roster is going to look like?
I can't wait to get probably half of these wrong on my 23-man roster. I'm going 14 forwards, 7 defensemen, 2 goalies, and a couple of guys on IR. Obviously, Crosby, Malkin, Rust, Rakell, everyone knows those guys are going to be on the team. Tommy Novak, that's a lock for me. Anthony Mantha, that's a lock. Justin Brazeau, that's a lock. I have Ville Koivunen, very much a lock to me. Philip Tomasino, Connor Dewar, they've shown enough. Blake Lizotte will be on this team. I think Noah Chari will be healthy enough by next week to the point where he will be on the roster. Kelsey is now practicing fully. It looks like he's been cleared for contact for the most part. So maybe he starts on IR, but now that he's been cleared for contact, I think he's going to be on the roster in some capacity unless they waive him before, which, hey, they may utilize waivers if they want to keep more young players than I currently have on my roster. Like, I have some young talent making this team, but if they feel like more young talent could be on the team, they could utilize waivers and get rid of a couple of these veterans. Philip Hollander, I do have making this team. I think he's had a good camp. I think he is NHL ready. I think he deserves to be on there. And last but not least for the forwards, I have Avery Hayes over Tristan Bros. I think Avery Hayes has shown enough so far that he can hang with them. That game against Columbus, I felt like was the best game of his preseason to date. That no look behind the back pass to Sidney Crosby to spring him for that goal was beautiful. I have him making this team. I could very well be wrong, and it's Tristan Bros on this team ahead of him, but I have Avery Hayes right now. But I will say this. Tristan Bros is going to be in the NHL for multiple games this upcoming season. I think he's going to be the first call-up. Could be wrong. That's how I see it. Defensively, Chris Letang, Erik Karlsson, Parker Weatherspoon. No surprise there. Connor Clifton, Matt Dumba. I have both of them making this team. I do have Owen Pickering making this team. I think I'd be floored if he didn't make it. I think he's had a great camp. You can't keep him off this team. I think he's NHL ready. And for my final defenseman, I'm sorry, people. I have Ryan Graves on this team. I don't think they're going to waive him before the start of the season and bury his cap hit in Wilkes-Barre. I think that could happen during the year if he continues to really stink up the joint. But before the season, I don't think that's going to happen. That is going to make people mad because that means I have Harrison Brunick going back to Kamloops. That's just the way I see it right now. But could he get the 9-game trial? I absolutely think they will consider it, just like they did last year. He came down to the final day of camp before they sent him back to Kamloops. But that's how I see it as of right now. I would not be surprised if they at least gave him the trial, but I think he's going to spend the season there, and then next year he's NHL ready. 2 goaltenders, Tristan Jarry, Archer Shilovs, no surprise there. I want to believe that Miroshov is going to be on the team, but again, I really want him to get the full season in the AHL. I think that's best for his development at this point. And then for IR, I have Rutger McGroarty and Kevin Hayes, and they will have to make some corresponding moves at forward to deal with that once those 2 guys are ready to come back, unless maybe they don't want Hayes during the season. He has a year left on his contract, but McGroarty, he is going to be on this team once he's fully healthy. Maybe he has a conditioning stint with Wilkes-Barre coming off of IR, plays a few games down there, then comes back up. But that is my roster as of right now. I hope that I nail it. So there you go.
Thank you, Hunter. That was good. There were a couple surprises in there, a couple twists and turns. Appreciate that. I was pretty thrown for a loop that you picked 14 forwards. Because if you remember last season, too, the Penguins did have 14 forwards coming out of camp. So, for me, I didn't go that way. But happy that we kind of ended up on a different wavelength there, I guess. But I'm going to have a little drink here before I say mine. Maybe that can be the poll this week. What is in Kelsey's cup here? But all right, let's go.
Water, coffee, tea, something.
We'll get a Twitter poll going. What's in Kelsey's mug? All right. So anyway, this is my 23-man roster. Much is the same. I actually put out some lines too. So I'm gonna read it that way. But I might, I think there's a couple surprises in here too, but I'll let you be the judge of that. So for the first line, I do have Koivunen and Crosby and Rust. I think that's going to kind of be a combo to start the year. I think Koivunen is going to play with Crosby. And Crosby loves Brian Rust. I think Rakell would probably fit better there, but that's a conversation for a different time. So anyway, Koivunen, Crosby, Rust. Then I do have Rakell, Malkin, and Mantha. Anthony Mantha's kind of been stapled to Evgeny Malkin's wing throughout camp. I think that's something that's going to stick, but we shall see. And this is where it gets a little dicey, a little interesting, because I have Justin Brazeau. I have Tristan Brose centering that line. And then I have Philip Hollander. I do think he is ultimately going to make this roster at the expense of someone else, which I'll get to in a second. And then for the fourth line, I have Justin Brazeau, Blake Lizotte, Connor Dewar. I think I don't want to say that fourth line's written in stone, but I'm pretty confident that that's probably what the fourth line is going to look like to open the season. I do think also that Achari is going to be ready to start the season. I don't expect him to be waived. I do think he's going to be on this roster. Therefore, I expect the Penguins to waive Philip Tomasino. I know that's a little bit controversial, but I do think there are going to be some waivers exercised. And to me right now, he's the odd guy out. He's been good in this camp. I hope he shows more. I do not want to see that happen. But if they're serious about this youth push, I wouldn't discount that possibility. So that's what I have right now. As far as the defense core, I do have 8 guys on here. I really struggled with this as well, but for a different reason than Hunter. So I have Parker Weatherspoon, Erik Karlsson as the first pairing. I have Connor Clifton playing his offside. I have him with Letang on that second pairing. And then I have the third pairing as Owen Pickering and Harrison Brunick. I think Harrison Brunick is almost a lock to make this roster. That is my opinion. I think he's been too good in this camp. I think he's been a top 3 defenseman in this camp, and it's going to be a shame if he doesn't at least get that 9-game trial run. And I think there's room to do it. I think they're going to make the necessary moves to get it done because he's simply too good to be in juniors right now. And that's the only other option we have. So I have Pickering and Brunick as that bottom pairing. I do have Matt Dumba making this team. And then I struggled real bad between Ryan Graves and Ryan Shea. I just don't see, at first I thought that Ryan Graves may get the waiver treatment. I just can't see the Penguins doing that just because of his contract. They do have the cap space to do it, but I think they're going to avoid doing that if they can. I think they're a little bit more willing to waive a guy like Ryan Shea rather than Ryan Graves. So 8 defensemen, 13 forwards, and then my goaltenders are the same. I have Tristan Jarry and Artur Shilovs. I think Shilovs has shown enough that he should be that other tandem partner for Jarry. Murashaw's been unbelievable. If this roster goes young, I could see him maybe getting a shot, but to be honest, I just think for his development, starting the year in the AHL is probably the right call. Give him some runway there. If he dominates, you bring him up later in the season. So, ta-da! That's mine.
And then do you have your IR people?
Oh, yeah, yes. And then same thing. Kevin Hayes, Rickard Rakell.
Yeah.
Because Achari's skating, I think all indications are that he's probably going to be ready soon. So I don't see him getting cut from this roster. I know that's going to make a lot of Penguins fans groan, but I just don't see it happening. They value what he brings to the roster too much, and he's not somebody who has to play every day.
Yeah, Kevin Hayes, like, they love him in the locker room. Like,
yeah.
I know he's not like one of the main leaders, Kelsey, but he's definitely someone that some of the young players can go to. Very relatable. He's funny. You know, he can give a quote when some of the other big leaders don't want to. I think he's a very popular player in that locker room, so I don't think they're going to cut him.
No, and he'll be on. I mean, he's not even going to be. When he was injured a week ago.
Right.
They said he was out at least 4 weeks. I mean, he's not going to be ready for the season regardless. But they'll have some decisions to make once those guys do come back.
Agreed.
Because we mentioned it. You know, McGroarty, as of last season, belonged on this team. I think he's probably going to have to kind of earn his way back, especially with some of these young guys pushing. You know, you mentioned Avery Hayes. I don't have him quite making the cut. I do think he's going to be one of the first call-ups, but that's how you felt about Tristan Brose. We were kind of just flip-flopped on that one. But I think there's just a lot of guys in the mix now, and in order for McGroarty to kind of secure back his spot, he's probably going to have to get a little run in the AHL first. Just my opinion. But as far as Kevin Hayes, that's going to be an interesting decision, to say the least. So yeah, we'll see what happens, but it'll be interesting nonetheless, folks. I really think this training camp is going to be different from training camps past. You are not going to see, you know, Ville Koivunen get blocked by a veteran that shouldn't be there. You're not going to see Tristan Brose or Avery Hayes, if they've earned this spot, get blocked by a guy who shouldn't be there. Like it's just not going to happen this year. Another dark horse I want to keep an eye on, though, is Robbie Fabry. I think Robbie Fabry has had a pretty good camp up to this point. He is just at 150% in every rep, every practice. He's one of the hardest workers out there. If I were to do 14 forwards instead of 8 defensemen, I would have Fabry in the fold there too. So that's my roster. But any other commentary about training camp up to this point? I mean, it's been fun. I got to say that.
It's been a blast. And neither of our rosters have Danton Heinen. So that assumes that we have the Penguins waiving him. So we'll see. Maybe we're both wrong about that. I think his camp's been totally fine, by the way. But, you know, maybe, you know, for a couple of these younger players, they'd be like, hey, Danton, we thought you had a good camp, but we're going to go for one of these younger players or two that we felt like outplayed you. You know, no hard feelings or anything like that. But, you know, I still wouldn't be surprised, Kelsey, if he made the roster, but he wasn't on my 23-man one. So we'll see. Same with Robbie Fabry. He's on a PTO. I think he's also been totally fine. Scored a goal in the last preseason game against the Red Wings. We'll have to see how he does the rest of the preseason. But yeah, this has been a lot of fun to cover the camp. It's been very competitive. I assume we're going to get more cuts, honestly, after this game against the Red Wings or after that next game against Buffalo, because the game on Friday, it's like a home and home with the Sabres. That game on Friday is going to be the dress rehearsal. Like, you're going to see basically the A squad, the entire A squad play. You kind of saw it against Columbus in a little bit of a way. I know Ben Kindle was out there, but I still don't have him making the team right now. A couple other players were out there that I don't have making the team either. But for the most part, that was almost the A roster too. For the Friday's game, you're going to get, I think, basically the full A roster. So these next two games, you're going to see a little bit of experimenting. And speaking of that, Rickard Rakell has been experimented at center during camp and preseason as well. He's also been playing on the penalty kill a lot more, which I have found interesting because when I went on Natural Stat Trick, I thought my eyes deceived me. He's played less than 5 minutes on the penalty kill since becoming a Penguin a few years ago. His highest penalty kill minutes in a season came with the Ducks, 40 minutes. After that, it's 35. So it seems like Kelsey, they're really testing this out to get some new combinations on the penalty kill, which I honestly don't mind. You don't need to put your quote unquote worst players on the penalty kill. You can put good players on there to, obviously, you're trying to prevent the puck from going in the net, but you're also, when it comes, you're creating offense, shorthanded rushes, shorthanded opportunities, shorthanded breakaways. So Rickard Rakell, excellent for those, in my opinion. So you're really seeing a lot of that so far. He's getting a lot of work with Brian Rust on the PK. He's getting some work at center. I think they're just trying to experiment with him a little bit. Obviously, he's been a winger throughout his entire career. He's hardly played on the penalty kill, but they're maybe trying to unlock a couple more aspects of his game that we just haven't really seen yet.
Yeah, I agree. And I actually like this. I went back and forth on it because it's one of those things, it's a little strange, especially with the center situation. I'll get back to the penalty kill thing in a second, because quite honestly, I think the penalty kill thing is something that should have been happening a long time ago. Rickard Rakell is one of the Penguins' best defensive forwards by metrics, by pretty much everything. He blocks shots. He does a lot of the dirty work. So it's kind of a surprise to me that he hasn't been deployed there yet. And like you said, good players play on the penalty kill. Austin Matthews kills penalties for Toronto. There's no reason that Rickard Rakell and Brian Rust can't kill penalties for the Pittsburgh Penguins. And I actually did ask Dan Muse about that. I'll get to that in a second. But the center thing, I was kind of going back and forth on because in some respects, you think about how this roster is going to shake out. And, just because he's playing center in training camp, that doesn't mean that's going to be where he is to start the season. I don't think it will be. He's going to be in that top six. But he was a 35 goal scorer last year. And you don't typically see, teams, you have this 35 goal winger, all of a sudden getting these center reps. And not just center reps, he's getting kind of like third line center reps, which is kind of interesting because obviously with Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin in the picture, maybe he centers Evgeny Malkin sometimes, but I don't really think there's any reason to do that with Malkin per se. I could see maybe more like Tommy Novak centering Malkin, but I wouldn't go Rickard Rakell centering Malkin. So I think it's a little bit strange, but at the same time, I like that they're kind of playing into his versatility a little bit. He did play center for one game last season against the New York Rangers when Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin were out of the lineup. And guess what? The Penguins won that game. First line center, Rickard Rakell. What a game that was.
Probably one of the best games of the season, if we're being honest.
Actually, and it also crushed the Rangers too. So
it sure did, and it made me very happy seeing all those very pleasant New Yorkers just going back to their homes mad. That makes me happy here. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to say it, and I'll just say it. It makes me happy too. It's okay. But so yeah, I mean, like we've seen this. It's not like Rakell hasn't played center. Muse even said that. I asked him about this. He played center like way back in near the beginning of his tenure in Anaheim. But you have to wonder if this is kind of something that plays into his trade value a little bit too. Just because, we've seen what centers have gone for at the deadline the last few years, and teams are paying a premium on centers. So if Rickard Rakell can kind of up his value by showing off that versatility, playing a little bit of the center position, weaving in and out of those roles, I think that's something they're kind of willing to experiment with just to see where it goes. But I would kind of put a cap on that experimentation because he's still your leading goal scorer. You don't want to screw around with that too much because at the end of the day, the trade value is in who puts the puck in the back of the net. And if he's putting the puck in the back of the net at the same rate that he was last season, it's hard to imagine that his value is going to go down in any sense. So you got to be a little bit delicate with that. But this is what Muse said about that situation. This applies to Brian Rust as well. And he said about Rakell, he's a player. He's shown this from an offensive standpoint, even as a wing, who's really good at attacking the middle of the ice. He's good at finding space in the middle of the ice. And you look at his game in the offensive zone and on the power play, he's got some great instincts there in terms of how he positions himself to be a scoring threat, but also just how he positions himself in the middle of the ice to be available. We also view him as a responsible player, a player that can be trusted on the defensive side. You get a player like him, which today, and he's talking about the last game against, who did they play? Columbus. I'm losing track. He got a little bit of time there on the penalty kill. Players like him that have spent a lot of time on the power play, they think like power play players. So they're able to anticipate plays really well. You combine that with his defensive awareness, really good stick. It's something we want to see. So I think he's kind of experimenting with, like you said, trying some of these guys that have power play minutes, that have a little bit of scoring potential, who also have a defensive conscious, putting them in those roles and seeing if they can kind of generate things the other way on the penalty kill. Because, I mean, penalty kill was a little bit disappointing last season. Started off pretty well. It fell off a cliff by the end of it. So I think they're hoping to find a little bit more consistency from that unit and hopefully, a little bit more opportunity to turn things the other way as well. And those two players do that for the Penguins. So yeah, I mean, that's that. That's all we have on the docket. Do you have anything else that you want to add? Anybody else you want to highlight, talk about?
Real quick, I will say this. I thought Saturday night was fantastic for the entire Penguins organization with Marc-Andre Fleury. I think this is going to be the start of a trend where you see this for other retired players. They come back to play a period. I thought this was handled with such class. The fan base was spectacular. And I said this to Pat on my show earlier today. That wasn't like your typical regular season crowd in a late season, game, a cold night, Kelsey against one of the worst teams in the league. No, that felt like a playoff crowd. Like anytime Marc-Andre Fleury did anything, make a save, use his poke check, hell, it passes the puck on his goalie stick, they just went wild. Like it was crazy. Like, I know we were all waiting for him to potentially get a shot at the empty net. Rickard Rakell, you've made the list, buddy. Can't believe he would do something like that at the end there. No, I'm just messing around. But I thought that was fantastic. I thought everything about it was great. Just wanted to end the show with that. That's how you honor a living legend here for the Penguins organization. It was a homecoming, 8 years in the making. Sergei Miroshov was awesome those first two periods, but this whole thing was about Fleury. And this was the final chance for everyone here to get to say, see you later. Like kind of like a goodbye / see you later.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, I have been at a lot of games. And, I obviously started covering the team last year, sat in the press box for every home game last year. There's nothing that compared to that. Yeah. I mean, that was just unbelievable. The atmosphere was unbelievable. And even afterwards, Dan Muse was asked, I think Josh Yohe asked him this question, just that atmosphere, like it kind of replicates a playoff atmosphere. And is this something that you can, look forward to as you look to the future? And that's what it was like. I mean, it felt like a playoff atmosphere. It was just every time he touched the puck, people were cheering. He made a basic save, people were cheering, and you just don't see that kind of reception for every player that comes around. And it can't be just understated enough how revered Marc-Andre Fleury is in Pittsburgh and in that locker room. Players don't always get this kind of reception from a city and from an organization, from teammates. I don't think there's a person in hockey and around hockey. There's probably not a person in sports like Marc-Andre Fleury. He is one of one. And the first thing everybody will tell you is just how great of a person he is. And that just radiated through that building all night long. And you could just feel the mutual love between Fleury and the city. So it was just really incredible to watch, really incredible experience to be a part of. Obviously, we wish Marc-Andre the best in his retirement. And the last thing I do want to mention about that, something that was really cool about that whole setup too, is that you have Sergei Miroshov, for those first two periods. You have Fleury in that last period, it was almost like a blend of past and future, just kind of infused into one night. It wasn't just about the goaltenders either. I mentioned the crowd, all this success that the Penguins had with Fleury in Pittsburgh, 3 Stanley Cups, 4 final appearances, a boatload of accolades for the big four, as it was then, all that past success. But then there was also, all the top prospects were in the lineup. And you kind of had this like sense of hope in a way too. So it was just kind of a nice molding of past and future in one night as well. But at the end of the day, it was about Flower. They made it about Flower, and it was so well done. Kudos to the Penguins organization. Good luck, Flower. And I'm just happy that they got to do this. This was a really cool thing. And like you said, I think we're going to see this across sports more, just in general for these athletes. So that's going to be a wrap. We kept it short for you today. We know we got a game to watch, and you have a game to watch. So for Hunter Hoodies, I'm Kelsey Surmatz. We'll be back at you next week with a new episode, and by then the rosters will be set, and we'll be getting you ready for the season. So until then, stay out of trouble in that.